In the quiet heart of England, where the land undulates in slow, familiar rhythms, and the sky hangs heavy with the weight of time, there is a field. It looks like any other, mud and grass and the remnants of crops long cut down. But beneath that soil lies a silence far older than the hedgerows, older than the farmhouse that leans a little to one side, older even than the narrow road that bends around it like a ribbon forgotten by the wind. The field sits in Staffordshire, a county whose name itself seems to murmur history. To most who pass by, it is unremarkable. But once, in the summer of 2009, it became the most extraordinary patch of earth in England. The morning it began was simple, unsuspicious. The kind of day that folds neatly into 1,000 others, soft light, cool air, the hum of insects somewhere unseen. Terry Herbert, a man in his mid-50s, walked out with a metal detector in his hand. He was no archaeologist, no historian, just a man who liked the company of the past, who enjoyed the quiet ritual of searching, of listening for that faint electronic pulse that hinted at something buried and waiting. He'd spent years walking fields like this one, and he knew that most days offered only disappointment. An old nail, a bottle cap, a few coins dulled by rust. But he came anyway, because sometimes, very rarely, the ground answered back. He was walking across a field near Hammerwich, near Lichfield, a place that had been farmed and ploughed for generations. It belonged to a local farmer who had given him permission to search, and Terry moved methodically, sweeping, listening, pausing, moving again. There was nothing romantic about it, just patience and the small private hope that maybe, just maybe, the earth might give up a secret. When the first signal came, it wasn't particularly strong, just a quick bright blip in his headphones. He knelt down, dug carefully, brushed away a little soil. The glint that caught his eye was not rust, not aluminum. It was something richer, something older. He found gold. At first he didn't know what it was, just that it shimmered in a way few things do. It looked too intricate for a coin, too deliberate for decoration. He cleaned the edges gently, and a pattern began to emerge, twisting lines, interlaced forms. Anglo-Saxon, he thought, though that word didn't yet carry the enormity it soon would. He pocketed the piece, moved a little further, swept again. Another signal, then another, and another. Over the next few hours the field began to change. What had been a place of quiet routine became something electric, charged with possibility. Each signal led to another small object, each object to another breathless realization. Fragments of gold and silver, tangled shapes that once adorned weapons, hilts and armour. Bits of crosses too, bent, broken, deliberately folded. Pieces of a forgotten story, scattered and buried for 13 centuries. Terry returned home that evening with a box of finds, his mind reeling. He called the local finds liaison officer, as required by law, and by the next morning the quiet field in Hammerwich had the attention of the archaeological world. But before we linger too long in that modern excitement, it's worth travelling backward, to the world that buried these treasures in the first place. In the 7th century, England was not a single kingdom. It was a mosaic of rival realms: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Kent, and others, each ruled by kings who were part warlord, part poet, part priest. The Anglo-Saxons had come centuries earlier, after Rome's legions withdrew from Britain, bringing with them their language, their gods, their art, and their wars. They were a people who believed deeply in the power of gold, not only as wealth, but as something sacred, something bound to reputation, to victory, to the divine. Gold was not currency in their world, it was symbolism. It marked the worthy, decorated the faithful, sealed alliances, and honoured the fallen. To own gold was to command loyalty. To gift it was to shape destiny. The Staffordshire landscape of that time was part of Mercia, a powerful and often brutal kingdom that stretched across the Midlands. Its kings, men like Penda, Wulfhere, Ethelbald, were feared and admired in equal measure. Mercia's warriors were known for their ferocity, their devotion, their artistry in both war and craft. To fight for Mercia was to carry its soul on your sword. And the items buried in that Staffordshire field likely belonged to men of that kind. Warriors, leaders, men whose gold spoke of status and sacred duty. When archaeologists arrived after Terry's call, they treated the site with reverence. The first professional excavation began within days. The field was cordoned off, guarded. What followed was not the roar and excitement of treasure hunters, but a slow, methodical uncovering. Every inch of soil was sifted. Every fragment, however small, was recorded. It soon became clear that what Terry had found was not a single item, or even a few dozen, but thousands. Piece after piece emerged, as if the land itself had been holding its breath for over a millennium. Pommel caps from swords, decorated with garnet inlays. Fittings and mounts that once gleamed on warrior belts. Crosses crushed and folded, their beauty twisted into secrecy. Thin sheets of gold embossed with filigree so fine it seemed impossible that human hands had shaped it. And then the numbers began to climb. Hundreds of items, then thousands. By the time the excavation ended, more than 3,500 fragments had been recovered. Later analysis would push that number to nearly 4,000. It was, by every measure, the largest Anglo-Saxon hoard ever found. Larger than any royal burial, larger than Sutton Hoo's grave treasures, larger than any single discovery of early medieval gold in British history. The archaeologists worked through the days and into the nights, documenting, cleaning, preserving. Each new piece told part of a story, though the full tale remained just out of reach. What they found was not a king's treasure buried with his body, nor a ritual offering to the gods. The hoard contained no coins, no domestic items, no jewellery meant for women. Instead, it was almost entirely martial. It was the language of war, translated into gold. Sword hilts, scabbard fittings, helmet fragments, the tools and ornaments of battle. Some pieces bore inscriptions in Latin, quoting lines from the Bible. "Rise up, O Lord, and may your enemies be scattered." A warrior's prayer etched in gold. Many of the objects had been stripped from defeated enemies, their splendour turned into trophies. Others had been bent, folded, or cut apart, perhaps as an offering, perhaps as a deliberate act of desecration or protection. It is possible that the hoard was buried during a time of crisis, perhaps when Mercia was at war. Some historians imagine a defeated army retreating, hiding its plunder to keep it from capture, never to return. Others think it may have been a votive deposit, gold buried as a gift to God or to older pagan powers, as the old belief still lingered in the soil. Whatever its purpose, it was hidden deliberately and deeply, and the earth, faithful and indifferent, kept its secret for 1,300 years. Terry Herbert's discovery became headline news. Newspapers called it the Anglo-Saxon treasure, but that phrase barely scratched the surface. This was not treasure in the sense of pirates or king's ransom, it was something far more intimate. These were fragments of lives, each one touched by human hands in a world half remembered. The artistry was staggering. Gold filigree patterns no wider than a fingernail, garnets cut with precision unseen in Europe since Rome. Some pieces showed the glimmer of red glass imported from distant lands, others the curling serpents and beasts of pagan mythology blending with Christian crosses. The hoard seemed to bridge worlds, pagan and Christian, warrior and priest, art and violence. It was, in a sense, the soul of an age captured in metal. As the news spread, the field in Hammerwich became a place of quiet pilgrimage. Historians, craftsmen, and locals alike came to see where history had surfaced. The British Museum took part in the conservation effort. Each fragment was cleaned under magnification, restored where possible, studied for clues. Together, the pieces began to speak. They told of a society both violent and devout, a people for whom faith and warfare were intertwined, where the same hand that raised a sword might carve a prayer into gold. The hoard's sheer craftsmanship suggested elite ownership, perhaps belonging to Mercia's royal workshops, yet its burial implied fear, urgency, or reverence. When the hoard was finally valued, it was appraised at over £3 million. The sum was split equally between Terry Herbert and the landowner as English law dictates. But for those who had handled the pieces, its true worth lay beyond money. It lay in the fragile connection between the present and a time when England was not yet England, when kingdoms rose and fell like the tide, and when beauty and brutality lived side by side. In the years that followed, exhibitions travelled across the country. The hoard found its home partly at the Birmingham Museum and partly at the Potteries Museum in Stoke-on-Trent. Visitors stood before the glass cases in silence, faces lit by the same gold that once adorned the swords of ancient kings. Some pieces were so small they could fit on a fingertip, yet their detail drew people close, until they were nose to glass, staring through centuries. Each fragment carried a kind of quiet magnetism, a pull that went beyond curiosity. It was the allure of something that had survived against time itself, and time, in the story of the Staffordshire Hoard, is the true character. 13 centuries of rain and frost, plough and hoof, all passing above while the gold slept below. Generations lived and died, never knowing what lay just beneath their feet. Then one man, on one ordinary day, walked out with a metal detector and changed the story of Anglo-Saxon England forever. In the end, no one can say for certain who buried the hoard or why. Perhaps it was hidden by a warrior priest as Mercia's fortunes turned. Perhaps it was the spoils of war, meant for redistribution that never came. Or perhaps, in some wordless act of faith or fear, it was given back to the earth itself. What is certain is that the hoard has transformed how historians see that age. It revealed not just wealth, but intelligence and artistry, an England of thinkers and makers, not merely of swordsmen. It showed that the so-called Dark Ages were not dark at all, but luminous in gold and imagination. Standing in that field today, you would never guess what lies in its history. The grass grows, the air hums softly, the soil lies undisturbed. The story has come full circle. What was hidden is known again, and what was once silent now speaks. The Staffordshire Hoard is more than a treasure. It is a whisper from the 7th century, a glint of light caught in the turning of the earth. It reminds us that beneath every quiet field, beneath every road and village and hedge, there is another England waiting, an England made of memory and gold, of faith and fear, of hands that shaped beauty in an age of blood. And if you listen closely, very closely, you might still hear the faint echo of metal on metal, the song of a sword being forged, the murmur of a prayer over gold, and know that some part of that ancient world still lingers just beneath our feet,